Okay, I got to 33 days fasted. Somewhere in there, I had started counting wrong, I think. Those last few days fasted were pretty hard, but overall, it actually got to 33 days. So that was pretty long for me. In the end, I realized I felt like I was just screwing up, not with the fasting. The fasting was fine. Well, I mean, that too, because I talked to y'all about the gum. That was pretty bad screw up. But mostly the fasting was fine at the end, except just that fasting turns out to be a really personal experience. And even though I didn't start it to be a spiritual fast, I don't feel like I'm capable of doing it without it being fasting and praying. So, because Jesus didn't say, when you fast because you're fasting for me, do these things. He just said, when you fast, do these things. So in the end, I felt like I was getting too muddled up in my head about that part that I wished I hadn't been sharing it online instead of, clearly I was sharing going along, because I was doing this thing where I'm trying to document that I hope that I'm going to recover eventually from all the things I've been dealing with all my life. So if I were to do another long fast, I think I'd just keep it off the internet and not do those internet updates for it. But because long fasting, extended fasting goes the way it goes, you don't just stop and then start again soon, usually, so I don't anticipate that I'd be doing another one anytime soon anyway. The day that I needed to quit did turn out to be one of those kind of situations where I very suddenly felt like, oh, this is the moment, I have to quit now. Earlier that day, I had been having a pretty hard time with the hunger pains. As I've mentioned a bunch of different times in the different videos, I just kept feeling them all the time since I kept having stuff coming down my throat from my sinuses, and so I never had a comfortable period of time where I wasn't hungry during the fast. And therefore, I had all that practice learning to ignore the hunger pains, which is fine to have to do. Like I said, it's pretty much a spiritual exercise, fasting. So you have to learn to deal with what you have to learn to deal with. But it was just really getting hard. And I'm pretty familiar with dealing with pain numbers and people asking you what your pain number is. And sometimes in other things I've done, I have to ask other people what their pain numbers are. Lots of people aren't used to being in pain, and they'll be at a 6 or 7 and they'll be like, it's an 11 out of 10. But I'm more used to giving out conservative numbers. But I was getting up there in the pain scale where I could not talk while the hunger pain was hitting. And I was trying to breathe and pray through it when I would get one. And it occurred to me that day, for some reason, I'm sure the Holy Spirit probably put that thought in my head. I was like, God's not going to let me keep doing this until in the way I had planned. And I was just going to keep going as far as I had decided. I thought that's not the plan God has right now. And although I believe God is going to do good things for me in the future, I was like, right now his plan is I'm going to have to quit this fast, and nothing's coming else before that. Quit the fast and later other things might come. So I had been thinking that during the day for a few minutes, just towards the end of the work day, when I couldn't talk and could barely breathe when the hunger pains were hitting. And then I went home and sat and talked to my daughter about it a little bit and told her I need to pray about it a little bit more, since I really didn't know. I was like, I think I'm probably gonna have to quit soon, but I really don't know. Does that mean like quit now versus quit in so many days or whatever? I knew I could tell from her reaction that she was like, sounds like you're probably quitting soon. Which she was not wrong about. But then I went and laid down in the bed. And one of the things that happens while you're fasting sometimes is because your metabolism comes down so low, you just start getting colder. Since I was doing this in the middle of summer, it was fine for me to be sleeping at night. Throughout most of that fast, it was fine. I was sleeping at night in a way that just let us not have to cool off the trailer as much as usual, hoping that helped the electric bill, and which it does, I'm sure. And then it would be really warm in the trailer, and I would feel fine. But that night I got super cold, and when it hit me, oh my goodness, it was just wild how cold my hands and feet felt. Like, okay, why is it 0 degrees in Florida in summer? So I was pretty uncomfortable with the fact that my metabolism was bottoming out too low at that moment. And I just kind of hollered out for a little help from my daughter, and she got me a warm cup of broth, and I drank a half a cup of broth that night around, it was probably 9 or 10 at night. I'd already been to sleep early before it happened, and I woke up within that state realizing I was not okay. And that's when I broke the fast, was that night right at the end of one of those days, knowing that I got to 33 days. So had my fast, and I'm done now, and I've had another day or two since that I've been working on refeeding, which I've been having a hard time with more than usual as well. It's really different, I guess, because of the fact that the metabolism and digestion thing had never totally shut down in terms of having food to digest the whole time. So the refeeding's been a little hard and uncomfortable, but that's okay. Been refeeding, finally got to a point this morning, which I'm now on Sunday morning while I'm recording this, to say that the refeeding is going well enough and that I know I'm past any problems that can come from that. So I'm not worried about that anymore. And I just wanted to say, as far as the spiritual side of fasting, since some people are watching these, do what you do. Don't compare yourself to other people. Don't be going for like, oh, if I went to this date or I went to this many days, that would mean this. It doesn't. Like I said, it's very personal. It's hard to talk about, but it does not mean that the person who can go a long time is so great. And it does not mean that the person who can go longer is getting more spiritual credit. That's not a real thing. As like the prosperity gospel, you're not fasting that you're buying any kind of merit or favor or goodwill. You're just, it's very different than that. So there could be someone who's doing a fast that they only went 6 days. So 6 days sounds like a small amount to me in a way, because I've been practicing fasting for years, but that could be a lot for them. That could be tremendous for that person. What they're going through has nothing to do with what I was going through. It's just a separate thing. When you fast, don't compare it to other people. Don't think that the spiritual side of it has anything to do with how spiritual you are, in terms of like, I think if I can do it this far, then that means something. Just do what you do. Enhance your prayer life. Get the benefits you can get out of that exercise of denying yourself. And don't worry about all those other things. Those things aren't real. You don't buy favor. You don't buy merit. You don't buy things that say, oh, now I'm a good person. Now I haven't made all these mistakes I've made in the past. That's not real. Those are not the ways you should think. But I do recommend fasting for Christians. I think you should practice it sometimes. Some of us, that we should see what we can do and get into that self-denial, and get into that seeing what we get into our prayer life from it while we're practicing that self-denial. It's an interesting experience that's, in my opinion, it is beneficial, even though it's not any of those things where you get credit for it, like, ooh, look how far I went. That'd be nice if that happened, I guess, that we would like to feel good about ourselves, but that's not what the fasting is. Well, now I'm going to have to just keep going with trying to be healthy with the way I eat in the future, which is pretty rough when you've been sick your entire life and you've got all these things that you can't really control, and you didn't get told the truth about what even works right for many years. I'll tell y'all, over the last few years, I've really been through something trying to understand how to view myself and how to view certain things that might be sin. I think it's a big thing in our culture that we have a lot of gluttony, and I'm not saying I've never been guilty of it, but I've had to realize also an important lesson about everything's not gluttony. Especially the mankind around you thinks gluttony and obesity are the same thing, and they're not only not exactly the same thing, they're barely related. Obesity comes from health problems, and the health problems can be caused by gluttony, but they've been caused by a lot of other things and then cause the obesity and then cause the gluttony. So you have to work on you where you're at and not let the ideas of mankind define who you are. And one of the ones that people say all the time in this culture when they're trying to help is they'll go, you took a lot of years to get this way. You took a lot of years to do this to yourself. It's going to take you a lot of years to fix it. You know what? I'm going to call that BS card out on that. That's not right. That's not the right way to look at it. I've had to really work through it for several years now to realize I just literally did not do this to myself. I was born with digestive problems. I did not choose to eat something I knew I shouldn't eat for years and years and years. I had 38 years of eating gluten that my body was attacking itself over because of the mistakes and the political fads of the medical industry. They like to medicalize people, and they don't really care too often if they're wrong. They might care, some of them, on an individual level, but you cannot go on that and run around making excuses for doctors every day. You got to recognize that industry on the whole is super captured and super screwed up, and they're just as human and fallible as anybody else. I did not go through, you can eat as much as you want of this type of food that's so healthy for you because I'm a glutton, when I started eating up to 10, 12 cups of vegetables a day for years. I did it because I was trying to figure out this is how to be healthy. I did it because I was looking for wise advice. I did not do this to myself, and I am not going to take the credit for doing it to myself, and I'm not going to take the guilt of doing it to myself. And it's really important. A lot of people, they're being raised on a super crap diet and they don't know better. I don't think my parents knew better. I'm not looking back going, oh, well, I didn't do it to me, but my parents did it to me. I think if my parents had known and understood, they would have done better, for sure. But we live in a fallen world, and there's a lot of problems in it. And there's a lot of people who are unhealthy just because they're unhealthy, not because they made themselves unhealthy. So I have to keep going back to it. I don't think there's any excuse for me not trying. I don't think there's any excuse if I give up. I don't think there's any excuse if I just say, people lied to me, whatever, this is what it is now, and this is how I have to live. I think it's good to keep trying, but it's not from guilt. And then we do also, on top of recognizing most of that has nothing to do with me, what was done, I have to still recognize I'm still capable of gluttony. I live in a very gluttonous society. I'm surrounded by gluttony 24/7. We look at our food industry, we look at our conventional farming, we look at all these subsidies that all the politicians are determined to keep their little gravy trains going and subsidize it for more decades, ever since the 60s, with the crap of the Farm Bill just destroying our economy, our food economy being destroyed by this stuff. And there's people just determined to keep doing it. But I can't control that. What I can do is I can opt me out. And I'm not going to go eat the Fritos and the Cheetos and the Lucky Charms and the whatever stupid, evil stuff that someone out there is thinking it's fine. Someone else thinks it's totally justified. Someone out there doesn't even know yet. They're just being raised that way. But I know better now. And so, because when you do better, you should, when you know better, then you should do better. I'm like, okay, now I got to try to do better. So I'm going to keep trying to not be a glutton in the future, in the same way that I'm going to try to understand I mostly wasn't most of the time in the past. Some of the times a little bit, yeah. Sometimes that stuff gets you, that you are on this crazy thing going on that is affecting everything in the way you think and everything in the way your body and your brain operates, by all the things that are going wrong in your metabolism, in your hormonal balances, in the other balances within your body. They're all affected, and you can end up doing stuff you really should not have. So that you can take responsibility for those things. And like I said, I'm going to go back to trying. I'm going to try to eat right. I'm going to try to eat in ways I've been learning across years can work for me. Sometimes I'll be right, and sometimes I'll be wrong. And I'm just going to keep trying whatever comes my way. So, for example, I don't think eating dairy is evil. I don't think it's all, no human should ever eat dairy. I know there's people who believe it. Dr. Berry believes that, and I love some of his videos. He's pretty great in some of what he puts out there, but I just don't agree with him on that. The same reason when I was a kid, I already didn't believe the world around me was telling me salt was bad, and I didn't believe it. I'll tell you what, you cannot have a biblical analogy that salt equals good over and over and over again, and then find out salt is actually just bad for people. It doesn't make any sense. So it's okay if other people don't have the same grounding in the scripture that I have, and it doesn't mean that to them, and they think that's dumb for me to base things that I believe to be true on that. I don't believe everything I believe about nutrition because of the Bible. I don't think the Bible comes out and says, Cheryl, you should eat this way. If you eat this way, that'll be the perfect way to eat. I don't think the Bible's doing that for us, but I think you can learn lessons from what it does say about food and understand. But God's not given us stuff in the Bible that's just completely 100% false. And so I think, again, salt's not bad. If it were, it would not be an analogy for good if it's just something that's pretty toxic to human beings and going to screw them up over and over. But also I think dairy's not. If dairy were just bad for human beings in general, the land of milk and honey would have been a pretty stupid blessing to get. So I don't think it was a stupid blessing. I think getting abundance in food from God is a beautiful, wonderful blessing. and that dairy can be a part of that. And so I've enjoyed exploring making fermented dairy over the years. In fact, I'm probably going to drink a little bit of kefir today. I think ideally I would do better on an all beef diet, is what I've been learning over the last few years, but I also am learning right now God has not decided to just give me the money to just fix everything for me financially, and it is what it is. I have to work with what I've got right now. So I am going to have beef in my diet, but not nearly as high of a percentage of my diet as I wish it were. So I'm going to keep trying. Those are all the things I'm going to talk about for today, now that I've run on for a while. But God bless y'all.